Fazana?
Just a minute.
Sound, please. Fazana?
Yeah.
Fazana?
Is it playing?
Yes, yes. Sound, please. Fazana? Fazana?
Yeah. Is it
We can
playing?
hear.
Yes, yes.
You can't see it?
Can.
No. Okay, guys. Welcome, everybody. Today is Wisdom Wednesdays. Every Wednesday, we come to you at 7 p.m. And today is our first anniversary. We've been with you for 1 year, and you have stuck with us for 1 year. We are very grateful for that. My name, as you know, is Soraya Marika Dean. And we are hoping to bring you a very, myself together with my colleagues, and we have a fabulous guest speaker today, guest presenter. We're going to talk to you about a topic that we all need to know about: capitalism. And as we know briefly, that's what I knew briefly, it is an economic and political system in which the country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit. So we at Wisdom Wednesdays, we are presenting this topic not in a manner of a lecture, but we want you to know who are you? Are you a capitalist? Do you value socialism? And be very mindful and reflective as we present and discuss, and really search your soul. Does this work for me? Can I do something different about the evolving, emerging, the well-established capitalism? Do I need to contribute more to a different kind of society? And then in the process, what is really important that we are discussing is that whether this capitalism is conducive to enhancing the nature of ourselves, our true selves. Does it enhance our family life? Does it promote the well-being of the community and the planet? Or have you witnessed, does it promote cutthroat competition, selfish ambition?
Soraya, you're muted.
Soraya, you're muted.
Was I muted all along?
Yes,
Halfway through.
in the last 2 minutes.
Oh dear, that was 2 minutes. Okay. Sorry. So we are presenting this fact so that we really understand as to where we stand as human beings. Are we capitalists? Are we socialists? Is there a thing called binary definitions? Can I be both? A little of each? So to put it in the context, we want you to know that the United Kingdom, UK, Germany are some examples of modern capitalist countries. But it is not the only economic system that's available to us. Many countries, even countries like Sri Lanka, Norway, Sweden, Canada, Netherlands, they incorporate socialist ideas into their society. So there's some degree of capitalism, a greater degree of capitalism, and some degree of socialism. So with us today is a special guest, a friend and a colleague to me, an incredible human being, Rai. Please welcome Rai. And she will share also powerful insights on the topic of capitalism. So stay with us. You got to stay with us and ask her the right question, learn and grow. And as usual, our panel, Sylvie, Fazana, and Carol, we are not here because we have nothing to do, but we are here because we have walked the tough road. And we believe we can all walk that tough road together. because we are here not just to play small, but to play big, big in the sense of how we can contribute to our world. And also we share this topic so that you can understand your country, Sri Lanka, the world, and what can I do to make it better? Because that is our final goal, not just to find self, but to bring you in, for us to join you, and together we take this journey. Because Horace Mann once said, mankind should be ashamed to die without making a major contribution to this world. So that is our goal. We can all come together and make this major contribution. So in that spirit, I want to invite my friend and colleague, co-host and co-founder of Wisdom Wednesdays, Carol, who is going to talk to about the nature of self and how does capitalism define self. Is there a mismatch, Carol?
Yeah, well, thank you, Soraya. I mean, it's nice to have you on the hot seat today. And as you said to everybody, it's 1 year. It's been a terrific journey with you ladies, and I'm so proud to be called your friend. And we also miss Kamani, and we miss Venerable Tenzin tonight. She's traveling. And so to get back to what you were saying, who benefits from capitalism? And what is it in the most simplistic of language? Individually, capitalists are typically wealthy people who have a large amount of capital or money or other financial assets invested in business, and who benefits from the system of capitalism by making increased profits and thereby adding to their wealth, while for some, it may mean their drive is, what I want to know is there some of them actually their drive to succeed, to be the best or to be the highest performer or the seller, while for some, it's the accumulation of wealth and money. The byproduct of it means we are in a culture of greed and acquisition. I mean, there's no other way to put it. People tend to define their self-worth in what they have accumulated, what they have. I mean, we all like fine things, but when is it enough? I always ask this question. When is it enough? You have a fine entourage. The first thing you collect when you have money is lots of people tag on to you. You have lots of women hanging around. We have fine clothes and shoes. Then you buy lots of cars, houses. You eat lots. You buy lots of food and jewelry. Trying to live with the Joneses, as they used to say when I was a kid, trying to live up to the Joneses. But when is it enough? When is this greed enough? How many houses can you live in at the same time? How many cars can you drive? As I said, we all like fine things. We all like to, work to have a better life for our children, educate our children. But what is actually happening with this kind of rapid accumulation of wealth with some? This is a really sad state that we are living in, this capitalistic ideology. It shows some lack of empathy for other people and how they live. We all come to this earth knowing one simple truth, that we all leave this world at some point and we take nothing with us. Nothing. So what has all this acquisition given us? It has maybe created a wealth that may be enjoyed by the next 2 generations of your family. But think about it. What you will create are uneducated, useless, moronic, grabbing, lazy humans that will continue to plunder, but not give back to this world. Now, as I say, I'm not generalizing. I would like to say there are a few who work to better everybody's lives. But I'm talking about the rest, So they will do nothing to improve their own productivity or their intelligence. Let's face it, we see that today. We see some of the offspring of various capitalists, various people who have accumulated, who really, I question the parents' intent in bringing up these children with all this wealth. You know, the parents' money becomes the children's money for some reason. And so the children are not motivated to work hard, educate themselves, and be productive human beings to society. So, and think about the less fortunate and have empathy for others. You know, it's not all about money. Money doesn't make you happy. As we've talked previously about the happiness quotient, as opposed to the GDP, right? And I think, you know, the short time we live on this earth, would you rather have accumulated lots of money and live in an unhappy environment? Or would you have happiness above all and good health? So yeah, I wanted to push the button on that one, Soraya. So I'd like to now move on.
Are you done, Carol, with your great
I
wisdom?
just wanted
Okay,
to touch that.
so I have a question, and then I will get you to introduce. Please introduce Vrai. So are you saying, Carol, that success isn't measured by money, power, or social rank, but it has to be measured by your discipline and inner peace?
Absolutely. And also what do you do for society? You know, how great a person are you with whatever you have accumulated? What is it that you do? What is it that you can do to better other people's lives? Mm-hmm. What is it that you can do to allow the state maybe to support the state to better somebody's life? You know, the less fortunate lives. So that's what I wanted to talk about actually when we talked about capitalistic nature here.
Okay. So before you introduce Rai, I want to just allude to something she's going to talk about. So for someone who owns a company and employs other workers, I'm sure capitalism makes great sense because there's more profits and brings in more resources. The problem is that many capitalistic bosses aren't great at sharing their wealth, which is one of the major critiques of capitalism, right? So the question today to Rai is, how does capitalism then define work, women, our contributions? So before she wades into the topic, Carol, would you mind please introducing Rai for us?
Yes, with great pleasure, actually. You know, I met Rai, I don't know, is it 10 years ago, Rai? She was actually, she was actually hosting a program, and she talked to me about women who were in need, right, Rai? So abused women and whatever. And she's moved on to greater heights now. So Rai Kelly Balthazar is a media professional, a feminist, a researcher, and activist. And for over a decade, she has volunteered her time working on projects aimed at social transformation and dignity, including livelihoods for women in war-affected areas, child welfare, and community building. She's a member of 2 organizations that lobby for political accountability, transparency, and social justice. In 2019, she convened Women's Voice in Politics, a platform for women in the political space to build their capacity, share knowledge, and build solidarity across parties. She has over a decade of experience working in television. Rai has a BA in design, Northumbria University, UK. She presently works as a researcher with a focus on gender. And most importantly, I'd like to say Rai was mentored by my good and late friend, Dr. Malati Dialvis, the anthropologist. So over to you, Rai.
Thanks so much, Carol, for that introduction. And yes, I think I'm channeling a little bit of Dr. Malati as I sit here. I think a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, I don't think I'd ever sit here talking about capitalism, but here I am. And I'm truly very honored that you asked me to be a part of Wisdom Wednesdays, which I think has been, I mean, congratulations. A year is certainly a long time to try to share wisdom and to, you know, kind of keep the bonds of sisterhood together. So congratulations to all of you. And I think that's an amazing feat. And I'm really glad that I get to talk a little bit about work and work in particular. I think what's interesting for me, Soraya, Carol, and obviously everyone else watching us, is I think when we're talking about, you know, Carol, you spoke of a system, you spoke of individuals who, you know, could be defined as capitalists, but I think we need to obviously, as we're talking about this, expand and look at a larger system that's a problem. I think if we look back to Sri Lanka's own history, I think the kind of bigger building blocks on which we built our country on, like education, like healthcare, has been built on socialist values. Our free education, free healthcare has been built on those systems, and it served us very well. And it continues to serve us. I think even now in this time of crisis, as we're dealing with COVID, irrespective of how we feel about how the government is handling it, really, I mean, if you look at it and reflect on the last year, it was the fast working healthcare workers and the very, the kind of structures that we built for decades that helped us keep some sense of, normalcy. So we have to account for how those socialist systems have supported us as a country before we go into addressing work alone. So work in this capitalist system, I think, Soraya, you touched on this in the introduction, and Carol, you spoke of this very briefly, about, it's about what we do with the wealth that we have and how we share that system, right? And I think here in Sri Lanka now in particular, because there isn't, although I think all of us, and I know we're not going to be talking politics, but we are in some sense very political, each of us. And I think everyone in Sri Lanka has some kind of political view. We sometimes don't particularly like these tags, right? This capitalist tag or a socialist tag. I think we kind of stay away from it because there is a sense of being perhaps aligned to a party, or I mean, I myself am not sure what is it that scares us so much from being able to kind of define what our values are, what our ideology is. And hopefully conversations like this will lead to a better understanding of where we stand on that spectrum. But today in particular, I'd like to talk about, with May Day coming up just this weekend, we're constantly talking about the rights of the worker and then the capitalist system. And I think that is, this is very timely that we're talking about this with May Day just around the corner. But today, I think I'd like to bring the focus back to something that is very, is something that we've been trying to, create a little bit of noise on. And I know several organizations have been kind of bringing this story and kind of piecing it together, which is on unpaid care work. When you have kind of a capitalist system, or any system for that matter, the kind of work that goes into creating a worker. And when I use the term worker, it's anyone who works, right? Anyone who works in any kind of setup, be it an office or a factory, anyone who goes to work, there is a certain process, a certain setup that is necessary, like social conditions that are necessary in order to produce what is needed for a worker, right? So there will be care work, there will be food, there will be a certain number of hours of rest. All of these things have to be produced and reproduced over and over again for someone to be able to actually exit their homes and go to work. But I think, and now in the light of COVID, actually, you don't even exit your homes. You are at home trying to work also. So in this light, that group that we talk about, work, when we're talking about workers, we're always thinking of people who actually leave to workplaces, to factories, to offices, but we often don't really take into account the work of the people who reproduce these conditions or these social conditions in order for one group to be able to leave their homes to go to work. And that is predominantly, especially culturally in places like Sri Lanka, that is mostly women who do that kind of work. And what we like to call it is, we call it unpaid care work. Now, I know this might sound like a lot of terminology that I'm throwing in today, but it's really quite simple. It's what predominantly our mothers, our grandmothers, most of us, and perhaps many generations more women will continue to do, which is basically everything that you do at home, from cooking, cleaning, ironing, washing, taking care of the elderly, taking care of children, taking care of those who are sick, taking care of neighbors, taking care of your communities. It's really interesting when you go into any home. I mean, it doesn't have to be I'm not talking only about urban homes, anywhere around the island, and you go and say to any woman, what have you done today, or what do you do for work, or do you work? No, I don't do work. Or in Sinhala, this idea of mokut karane, I don't do anything. When translated, I think it kind of loses its buzz, but mokut karane, I don't do anything. But essentially, you're awake from 4 a.m. and you probably you're the first to wake up and you're the last to sleep. And everything that you do is work. But the idea that you're not doing anything, it's just, there's nothing, you're not doing anything. There's no value to what you do. So you can be waking up at 4 o'clock, cooking breakfast, cooking lunch, waking up your kids, sweeping the house, sweeping your garden, taking care of the pets, getting your kids off to school. If your kids are in 2 different schools or in 2 different locations, having to pick one of them up or both of them up, bringing them back home, feeding them a second meal. And so there are, I mean, I don't have to go on and on, but you understand that these are literally, these are the kinds of social conditions that continue to happen right throughout the whole day. And these are reproduced day after day, day after day, day after day. And this kind of system is rarely given any kind of value. It's not given any kind of importance because we think, because in our systems, there is no value for work, right? There is no value for the work of this, what we call unpaid care work. There's no value for it. And by no means am I saying that it should be paid for necessarily, but if we don't value it, then that creates, if you look at how people talk of women's work, even in Sri Lanka, you'll find a lot of these posts about only 36% of women are in the labor force. So you use the term only, right? And then you talk about creating structures, enabling women to go out to work and stuff like that. But we also don't take into account that it's 36 or 100 minus 36. The rest of that population then is really working. So 66% or 64% of our population then of women are predominantly they are the ones who are, I mean, obviously even in the 36 or 34%, those women are also working at home and then going to work, right? It's not that they're completely not doing their household work and leaving that aside and coming to work. They are also meant, because of our kind of capitalist system, they are meant to take care of that portion of work and also go to traditionally what we call work, right? So there are these huge kind of contradictions with how we value women's work and how we value work in general. So, I mean, most of the time, even if we are giving value to that work, say we have, as an example, like a domestic worker coming into work, you will notice that domestic workers are one of like the most underpaid in most cases. Most of them, I mean, there's no law to protect them. I mean, if you look at it, women who do care work, or even women who work in some, in schools or in hospitals, the kinds of people who do the hard labor are often not given any value. They are sometimes the ones who have the least amount of say, the most amount of work. So how are we valuing these people? How are we valuing their work? How are we valuing what they do? There's inequality in how they are being paid. They are not paid the same way. I'm not just talking about domestic workers. I'm talking about in this entire kind of system, right? And we also, I think what's interesting about this system is also how we kind of look at success, right? I think we look at success of women in particular as people who go out and who work like a traditional job. But there's also a moral obligation. You have to do a traditional job, but you still have to be the good mother. You still have to be able to manage your child's online classes. You still have to be able to pick them up from their tuition class. You still have to be able to go home and make coconut oil now. You still have to be able to make your own turmeric powder. You still have to be able to, manage all of these portions of all these parts of our lives without really, so the blame is constantly again the woman. The woman is meant to feel like she is really a part of, not just, but she is creating this crisis by being the ones to move away from home. If you look at migrant workers, as they went overseas, it was the plight of the young children who were being left behind and the fault of the mother, right? But you're not questioning the system that made a woman want to have to leave her family to go overseas to work. So you don't question the system, but you question the woman. And that is very much a part of this kind of capitalist narrative that we are also building on. And I think it's very problematic in how we look at women, in how we look at work, in how we measure success. That's clearly a big dog. fight out
Somebody's
here.
dog. Yeah. Can you mute Fuzzy? Can you mute everybody?
No, the dog is on my end, so you can't mute me. It's just a dog, the neighborhood dog, who's clearly having a
Go
very
at your
bad day
neighbors.
today.
Yes. But you
Um,
came to a very interesting point, Rai. Please,
Yeah.
please go ahead, and you have just 1.5 minutes, okay?
Sure. Thanks
Yeah.
for keeping
Please
me
finish that
posted on
thought.
the
It was
timing. Yeah.
very
So
interesting.
I think we're looking, we measure success by our ability to be a part of the labor force, but we're not looking at how in this system, women, predominantly women aren't, I mean, we are placing the blame on the woman. We're expecting the solution also from them, but the state in particular isn't providing the necessary means to support a woman. We're not looking or support anyone, actually. I've been talking about women in particular because that's the area that I may know best. But I mean, structurally, it is really problematic when we are looking at underpaid labor, we're looking at exploited labor, we're looking at, so I think as I mean, I've been talking about the problem, but before I wrap up, I just also like to kind of talk about possible solutions, which is also about the state then having to, state at the moment, if you look at it, there is a tendency, there's an idea, the state is no longer taking as much responsibility as it should with education, with healthcare, because it's expecting people now through this kind of capitalist mindset to come in to make amends for what is for that deficit. And I think the state needs to acknowledge that that can't happen. And we need to push the state to be able to give us more, right? And that means that as citizens, we also have a contractual obligation to our communities and to those around us. I think, like Carol said, it's about, you can't you can't remove yourself from this situation and then assume that everyone that everything will be okay. I think it is a part of a contractual obligation as a citizen and as a state in making sure that that there's a give take here. And I mean, there's a huge demand, like I said earlier, for even paid care work at the moment. So we're definitely shifting from kind of socialist values to pushing into kind of this very neoliberal capital structure that we need to be conscious of as we make our decisions, to see if that's what works best for us.
Okay, Selvi, you have a question?
Yes, I think it's a wonderful topic she's brought in, and it's been in the sort of spotlight for a little while. Women's unpaid care work. And if you, I mean, Marx has done an analysis of this, and how he says is that what women do, which is not paid for, is actually the central axis on which capitalism is situated. It is the main backbone of capitalism, right? And that's what's actually making it all happen. But it was so much valued by the capitalists, but they brought in patriarchy. And patriarchy actually devalues this contribution that women have done over the years. So capitalism is, interestingly, is very, very kith and kin of patriarchy. Is very much, partnering with patriarchy. If it doesn't partner with patriarchy, capitalism cannot survive. And patriarchy stays until capitalism lives. And patriarchy sees to it that women's paid care work is not valued, it is devalued, and it is not paid for, so that their profits are high. That's what makes the profits. That is the backbone of capitalism. And it's so good that Bray has brought this point into focus. And that's why all our problems we are starting, by attacking patriarchy and getting more value for women's work. Thank you
Right.
so much, Ray.
And however corrupt the system is, the women, the workforce, us, we have to go to this to the patriarchy to resolve it. And that is very sad, It's like in
Yeah.
Sinhalese they'll say, "Horage ammagen pena hanawa wage." Every time we go and say, "Give us a solution," you are the
Yeah.
cause of the problem.
Of course, absolutely.
And we are in this huge quagmire. And I want
Yeah.
to quickly tell this story. Yesterday, guys, I was driving at 75 miles an hour on the highway here in Los Angeles. I had a flat tire. I pulled the car to the corner, and now I'm taking my daughter to school. I'm on a Zoom call, a meeting, listening to the call. Now I had to hang up because I had to call for assistance, roadside assistance. And then the choice was between my job or my safety or my child being taken to school. What do you think I chose? I couldn't stay on that Zoom call, even though it was so vital. I had done so much work to listen to my group present. So I think all along we women, we make this choice, and the more we make the choice to transform and benefit our families and communities, the more we are pushed down and held where we are. And Rai, you just brought it all together. That was a fabulous way of understanding how unrewarded we women are in most of the time. Any other?
Selvi, I would like to, Soraya mention something here. When Rai was talking, I knew this was Selvi's moment, because Selvi has been pushing Rai. She's been talking about these issues for such a long time. And again, this conversation about capitalism and what you guys just spoke about, Rai and Selvi, it ties in with the other programs that we do. And I just want to remind the viewers, Soraya, that everything that we discuss and all the topics we choose are tied into each other, right?
Yes.
So over to you. Yeah.
Yes, and then again, acknowledging the fact that we've been here 1 year, and there is a reason for that success, is that we recognize that we are different flowers from the same garden. And I think this is very critical for women to realize, because sometimes we can sabotage our own communities, meaning the women who work with us. So on that note, we must spread further, because I think education is critical. We want every woman to know in what kind of a society she is living and working, and what kind of society is she handing over to her child and the generation, and what kind of society is, whether is it empowering the citizenry, our country, our community, our government, or is it continuing to stifle us? And then if it is continuing to stifle us, guys, there's no choice. We have to come up, we have to talk, we have to raise our voices, we have to go beyond procreation, elimination, and digestion. There's something more in this world that you and I can do, and we wouldn't be telling this to you unless we have done it. We have built homes, we have provided basic income for families, we are working with youth, addressing domestic violence, promoting dialogue between warring factions in interfaith communities. We are doing it, we are continuing to do it, and it comes not without any challenge, great challenge, but we continue to do it. And our hope is at Wisdom Wednesdays that teach us what you know, and we'll share with you what we know, and we will move forward, because in some measure we can change things. So Fazana, capitalism, they say, prioritizes economic growth, and there are some benefits to that. But even when the environment becomes a casualty, the earth's resources are plundered in order to increase the growth. So what is this that is happening in the business world and capitalism that we don't see beyond profits?
Yeah, Soraya, that's an interesting area I wanted to talk about, because economic growth is one of the most spoken about or touted objectives of governments and companies around the world, and seems to be like a prerequisite for capitalism. If there's capitalism, there has to be strong economic growth. But yet we know that resources on this planet are limited, right? And the current economic system seems to lead humanity into a dead end in this area. So the question is capitalism in itself a contradiction to a sustainable economic system? How can you sustain this economic system if you are continuing to plunder the planet, you know? So the question is, how can you preserve economic stability and prosperity without exceeding the boundaries of our planet's resources? You know, because most politicians' reaction to this problem will orbit around similar proposals of investing in renewable energy, electric mobility, improving recycling methods, investing in research, etc., which we have seen in the recent past, right? But very few have seriously questioned the structural problems and the possible alternatives to economic growth, commonly referred to as the increase of economic performance, or we call it GDP. So, you know, one of the main sort of definitions of capitalism, which most define, is by private property, competitiveness, and objectives of maximizing productivity and profits as its main characteristics. So you can see when people get very competitive, right? They have to plunder more and more resources, right? So what is the solution that we currently have on the table? I mean, sustainability and the transition to a low carbon, more resource efficient and circular economy are key in ensuring long-term competitiveness. But while asserting that private capital needs to be reoriented with more sustainable investments, this requires a sort of a complete shift in the financial systems at work, right? So, you know, we are promoting improved recycling and other technologies. These solutions can be sometimes, you know, part of the problem, because, you know, you do more and more and you develop more and you compete more. So there's more consumption, right? So, you know, one of the biggest problems that we have is this materialist and consumerist attitude in our society. And this, I think, even Carol and even Rai spoke about, right? So we depend on as many material goods as we currently do. Technologies such as wind power and more efficient production methods will likely not be able to compensate for the damage done to the planet, because though we are trying to do methods to minimize the effects, the requirements and needs are more. So whatever we do sometimes becomes negligible and insignificant, right? So one of the examples of a really exceptional example is the state of Bhutan, which we have used even in a previous Wisdom Wednesdays example, right? Because Bhutan measures its success not with GDP, with gross national happiness, right? So they have 4 pillars which guide its government's policies: sustainable socio-economic development, environmental conservation, preservation and promotion of culture, and good governance. So Bhutan has even imposed a fee of $250 per day for tourists and heavily restricted all forms of advertising. So, I mean, this is one route. So we have to, I feel, redefine what we call success, what we call economic development, because we have to look at economic development at what cost. And reducing this consumerism will mean a large change in our ideas. You know, a whole paradigm change is required to approach this, and it can only be done with a sort of a collective effort globally, where this message is brought through, because the populations are definitely increasing, and you know, consumption is required, but we have to prioritize on what we need to consume and how we consume and what damage it does to the environment. So this, I don't really have an answer to this, you see, because I feel, you know, if we do not want to get too radical and anti-capitalist, probably, you know, we need to strike a balance. But, you know, there has to be kind of a hybrid model to preserve the resources of this planet. Thank you.
So, Soraya, you're muted, Soraya. Soraya, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Carol.
Could I ask a question,
Yes,
please,
please
for
go ahead.
Fazana? You know,
Please.
so Fazana, you touched on this point about capitalist ventures are plundering the resources of the planet. And currently in Sri Lanka, that is happening. I think a lot of people are denying this fact, but we can see when you drive out of the Colombo area. And today I read somewhere that 10,000 acres are going to be degazetted from the mangroves. And we all know mangroves are such a necessity. We are Ramsar wetlands in this country, and we are signed to the Treaty of the Ramsar wetlands. And so, it also helps with flooding, stopping flooding and preserving water, so many other things that mangroves serve the purpose. And so a lot of this talk is about releasing lands for farming. When you farm at that text, who benefits? Is it the country as a as a whole, or is it capital who are actually farming, big time farming? Say you're growing acres and acres of corn. That's not going to benefit the people. So can you tell us, how is it that governments and states can address this form of capitalism without destroying nature's bounty? In other words,
So, Kyle, actually, capitalism is market forces, right? Supply and demand. So, I mean, even
enhancing
farming,
global warming,
yeah,
affecting the rainfall, that kind of thing. So over to you, Fuzzy. Yes, please tell me.
yeah. So it's more like, I mean, the supply and demand. So I feel, I mean, I also see all these forests being destroyed with the pretext of farming, but the small farmer, does the small farmer really benefit? That's why I felt that's a hybrid model of socialism and capitalism is what can only save this earth, or even Sri Lanka, because capitalism on its whole will only bring huge amounts of damage. That is for sure, because like you rightly said, some of these forests are not really sort of cleared for small time farmers. Again, it's the big large ventures that are capturing these forests and destroying them and growing. So again, it's the rich who become richer. So this is where we have to have a hybrid model where you have socialist ideology coming in. And rightly said, we have equal opportunity here for education, for healthcare. So these are very strong socialist models, right? And we still maintain those, but we bring in a lot of other areas in business and in other exports and so on, where we have a lot of highly capitalist models that are coming in. Yeah.
Thank you,
If
Fuzzy.
I
So many.
may,
Yes,
sorry,
right. Go
Sarah, if
ahead.
I may just very quickly pitch in, because I know
Absolutely.
I know there are many of us on this group alone that are very committed to our own kind of commitment to the environment, and it really is shocking. I'm so glad that Fuzzy spoke about this today, because I think it's a real great reflection of, it is really a place in which we can really understand and see the problems of our own value system, and how we treat the environment, and how we don't think mangroves are important, and how we don't think, because we're looking at development in a very particular way. We're looking at development within the optics of large buildings and paved roads, and we're not looking at development in this kind of wholesome way. And I think I'd like to just add on to that question, how do we then do this? And I think the solution is education, because we can't, if people aren't empathetic to their surroundings, then if they're not empathetic to what's going on, not just with people but with our environment, and understanding that we are only a portion of a larger system, then we don't think it's if we put ourselves as humans ahead of all species and all things and all beings, then I think we're constantly going to, we have this hierarchy of importance. And as long as we continue to place ourselves above all else, I don't think we're going to do very much good to ourselves in the long run. So education is the only way to change it. And education educating ourselves in how we can change our own, consuming. I think it was very interesting that you brought on these ideas about consuming, this need to constantly consume. So even, there's huge amounts of greenwashing that happens, that corporates kind of really get into as CSR projects. So you can be a soda can selling company, plastic bottles, and you will have plastic bins all over the island, and you will say, you're doing a great job, but really what you're doing is you're encouraging people to drink, and only, a very small percentage of those plastic cans will really get recycled, but to the consumer, you're recycling, so you're okay. So then what should we do then? The solution to that is to educate consumers in knowing that, that isn't what you should be doing. You should be looking at alternatives that don't include plastic at all. So it is this shift that we need to make in order to understand how it works. And that, I think once that kind of awakens in your mind, it changes how you live, it changes what you wear, it changes where you travel, it changes your very being. And that needs a lot of wisdom, guys. We have to have a lot more of those conversations.
Commitment. And also, Ryan, I think it's a come to Mother Teresa moment where she said, you don't have to feed 100, feed one. So I think changing ourselves, changing just within our communities would be a critical way to move forward, because since once we leave school, we don't think about it. We get sucked into the system ourselves, and we become consumers of a highest order. So, Selvi, now we spoke about the climate crisis, which is posing a grave threat to the collective future of millions. So many people are living below the poverty lines. The economic and social shocks of the coronavirus pandemic and unemployment is reverberating, and the richest 1% is accumulating more and more wealth. Our next generation, Gen Z and the millennials, say they have grown increasingly disillusioned with capitalism. So we know all human interactions are conditional. So why would anyone do anything for nothing? Selvi?
Good question. Good question, Soraya. And Soraya, you said something really crucial, that we have ideas when we are in school and when we are young, but once we enter the job market and start a job, we get sucked into the system. And we internalize the values of capitalism into us, and we don't even realize it. Now, when we were announcing this subject, I think there was some Facebook post which said, I hope you will say something good about capitalism also. Yes, Carol? Are we going to be so critical that we are not going to say anything good about it? No, we have things to say about it. And what it says is, we're not economists. If you look at it in the perspective of economics, capitalism has done wonderful. It has produced so much of growth rates. It has increased the production of goods. It has done so much, but for whom is the problem? Is the question? Is it for the economy, or is it for the people and the planet? See, that's what we are debating. So we don't need to be economists to talk about what capitalism has done to people, because we are the people and we know what it's doing to us. So that's why we are here to talk to you about what has it done to the people and the planet. But the most importantly, I think Soraya made this point, it has sucked us into the system. And we have internalized the values that capitalism actually peddles. And one of them is that human interactions are conditional. Is it really conditional? Are we really conditional beings that we do things only when we get something back in return? When someone does something unconditionally for no benefit for himself or herself, people view it with suspicion. What is the ulterior motive behind it? They would think. Why? Because they have internalized the values of capitalism. If they can't find anything, as an ulterior motive, they would conjure something. Oh, maybe it was because of this. Maybe it was because of that. But unconditionality is the nature of our human self. We like to do things unconditional. We like to be compassionate. We want to love. But capitalism doesn't allow you. See, that's where capitalism fails. Now, like nature, like if you look at air and water, the air that we breathe, the water that flows, the flower that blooms, are they conditional? They're functional, but they give unconditionally. And people internally are like that. But capitalism does not allow them to be like that. So that is where capitalism has failed the people in a very big way. Because unconditional love is the ultimate human experience. And we are not taught to be unconditional. How can we love unconditionally? So you see, that's where capitalism has failed people. Because we are caught up in this conditionality that capitalism has taught us. But when people act selflessly, they are seen as naive and foolish. Why would anyone do anything for nothing? Under capitalism, all transactions are defined by a price. Everything is commodified. Money is king, and the market decides everything. And, you know, I like to say something that happened during COVID. We had lovely time during the lockdown, because during the lockdown, we had the best crabs brought to our doorstep, because those crabs were not being sent to markets where they were sold at high prices. So they brought it to us. And for the first time, being in Sri Lanka, being a Sri Lankan, we had the best crabs. I said, my God, where were all these crabs all these years? You know, they were all going to markets where they can be sold at high prices. So this market decides everything. Now, economic engine is driven by the market, not by the humans. This is the problem with capitalism. And it is on full throttle without anyone in the driving seat. And then you can imagine where it will go and what damage it can cause. This is why we see that the planet is being eaten up so rapidly. When health is brought into the market, pharmaceuticals are being sold at the expense of people's health. Surgeries are being done on people who don't need surgeries. Why? Because they have been bought into the market system. I have a sneaky suspicion that the universe has introduced COVID-19 in order to break these markets. But only time will tell with that would be the case. Under capitalism, everything is commodified. People are commodities. Even family members are not exempt, and not exempt in this pricing system. Human trafficking is a big problem, as you know, and the world over, which the human right activists are facing it. And it is heartrending to hear some of the stories of young girls and children who are being sold. Now, capitalism has its benefits. For this young man who wanted to know whether we have anything nice to say about capitalism. In its race to achieve full production, it has achieved world capacity to produce goods for 3 to 4 times the world's population. But still, we have millions of children dying of hunger, poverty in the south, affluence in the north of the planet, and a few handfuls of families are deciding where the war will happen, where the peace will happen in the globe. So we have no say in this matter. Finally, I'd like to quote my guru, the mystic Sadhguru. He would say, we have more comfort and convenience today than ever before. We have more people on the planet than ever before. But are we happy? Are we healthy? Are we joyful? Are our human relationships thriving and successful? Is our happiness quotient high? I think Fazana brought in the Bhutan happiness quotient. In the US, per capita spending on healthcare has quadrupled from 1980 to 2018. So we are becoming more and more sick. The world is becoming more and more sick. If the answer to all this is no, then capitalism has failed to enhance the people. It has glorified money and made market reign supreme. This is my case. Thank you. I'm quite happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Selvi. I mean, I just thought we have all the problems lined up, but this is the umbrella of all challenges for us. So for the listeners, I would like to harvest from each one of you really quickly. We have just about 3 minutes. What can each one of us do? If you can just share one nugget or two maximum. Let's begin with Rai, who has really steered us into this conversation so magnificently.
So Soraya, I think I'm just going to go back to what I spoke about earlier, and because I posed a problem, I didn't have a lot of time to pose really a solution or to talk about a solution, but I think it's about understanding the value that we as understanding the structures that we live in, understanding how they oppress women, how they oppress those in underserved communities, in understanding and acknowledging sometimes our own privilege. I mean, I think those of us who might be a part of this conversation or listening to this, because it is also in English, we are from a particular kind of community, perhaps a kind of a particular class, perhaps, understanding that, and then working back with, because we are appealing to people. We're not at the moment through these conversations appealing to governments. If we're appealing to people, then understand where we come from and understand why we need to then look at women in particular and the work that women do, and look at the value in it. And I really like the portion that we talked of the environment, because that's so true to me. And I know as an individual, the last 3-4 years, I myself have made huge changes in trying to understand what it means to consume responsibly, or I call it conscious consumerism, and to be super conscious of every single thing I wear, I buy. And I think once that awakening kind of happens, it really does latch on to every other part of your life. And I hope that that's a kind of wisdom. I mean, that is the only wisdom that I have to share.
Thank you so much. And Fazana, I know you are the one from corporate Sri Lanka. What can we do? Just one thing, how do we hold our employees accountable?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking of something when Rai also mentioned, we also do a lot of conscious consumerism in our day-to-day lives. And I always tell my kids also to go back to the era of our great-grandparents and grandparents, right? I mean, they didn't have plastic. They didn't have plastic bottles or the plastic bags that we use today. I remember my mom saying in the 70s when she saw the first plastic bag, it was like a big thing, and everyone looked at it saying, wow, what is this? Can we keep this? And they kept reusing it. So, I mean, we had glass bottles, and, everything was reusable, recyclable. The milk used to come in Elephant House, the bottle, and you keep the empty bottle and they take it out. So we did live healthily during that time. It's just that when everything goes mass scale from the small village level, self-sufficiency level, now, the irony is we have everything in mass scale, but as a country, we are insufficient also. We have to import things, right? So it's really unplanned development. Like Carol, you said, someone would clear a forest, not to be self-sufficient, to grow something where they make the most amount of money, right? So then you have more of that, right? That person makes profit, but you don't have anything. Like sometimes they're importing basic things like even rice, where we were the granary of Asia at one time, right? So I mean, I think this is a message that has to go strong, and honestly, I think we have to educate the younger generation more than the employees, Soraya.
Thank you.
It has to
Thank you
start
so
from
much.
the kids. And I want to read a comment by Chami before we close. He has said, thank you, Chami, for this comment. I remember reading about something called social democracy. The idea is to moderate inequalities of capitalism instead of completely overthrowing capitalism at once. Similar to what Farzana was saying, I suppose such a system would requires Sri Lanka to have good welfare systems. Yes, I mean a hybrid system. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you,
love
Cham.
that hybrid word. And we are on time. We have to end. But any quick half-minute comment, Sylvie and Carol? What do you want the people to do?
Well, I'm
I
going to
think
make a pass
I
because
will
of
go
time.
along with
Selvi, go ahead.
yeah, with I think the idea about conscious consumerism is one strategy which can actually throw the market into disarray. I think this is very important. I think the market should be thrown out in a way that it can help us, not hinder human beings. Conscious consumerism actually demands a lot of analysis about, are we actually doing this because of the advertisement, or because the Joneses are buying it, or is it because we actually need it? That kind of thing is extremely important, particularly with relating to pharmaceuticals. I
Right.
think that's where we need to target.
Right. So, Carol, I'll just direct you to this question. So I go to the grocery store tomorrow. I see lots of fruits. Do I have to think who brought those fruits in? Was it a small-time farmer or a big corporation with large profits? Do I have to be that mindful moving forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Try to help
Yes.
the small farmers. Yeah.
Try
Yep.
to help. Yes. Okay. So we are up. Time is up, guys. I think also the message I'm getting and delivering is we have to strike a balance, because it's true capitalists are damn greedy. We socialists can be also contributing to that. So something must be done to save humanity. I think a better world is possible. And Arundhati Roy says on some days she can hear it breathe. So our next program is May 12th. See you then. Thank you so much, with gratitude and appreciations for staying with us, and to our special guest, Rai.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Stars fuzzy, or do we have to log out and log back in?
Yeah,
I
we
think
have
you have to
log
stop
out.
recording. Stop recording.